Any advice for people who think that they might have like missed out on their passion or their a second career kind of thing?
I would encourage people to do what you love to do, because if you love doing it, then you'll be inclined to be better at it. Now, obviously that's within reason. I mean, like if you love playing basketball and you want to be on the Lakers, that might be a little challenging, but within reason, obviously.
Within reason, of course. Yeah. And you happen to have a unique skill set of growing up having this love for horses and this culture, and then also having the practical skill sets to pull off a TV show. And you do everything, right? The videographer, almost, yeah, everything.
I do everything. I shoot, write, edit, host, promote, fundraise, look for sponsors. Yeah, I do everything, and that's okay, because there's nobody telling me what my content ought to be or saying you can't put that in your show. Because my show is not controversial. My show, the motto of my show is the Wild West is still out there, and we'll show you how to find it. You know what I want to do? I want to have a program that's kind of like what happened with Billy Crystal's movie City Slickers, which came out in the early '90s. Everybody watched City Slickers and said, "Man, I want to be a cowboy and go on a cattle drive." I want people to watch my show and be inspired to go experience the West or learn how to ride. And I know from some anecdotal stories over the years that is what's happening.
Wake up, sleeper, and welcome to the Christ and Coffee podcast. My name is Dr. Haig, and today we're going to talk about all things Wild West. On the program, we have Mark Bedor, the founder, the maker, and host of today's Wild West. It is an award-winning program that you could watch on YouTube and PBS. We have Mark share about how this passion project came into existence later in life. We learn about his testimony as well, and how God brought his previous talents and jobs together to create this program. We learn about American history, American culture, and how this culture is celebrated in today's modern world. But before we jump into today's conversation, I do want to read our verse of the week, which comes from Isaiah chapter 43, verse 1. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. With that said, please grab a cup of coffee and enjoy this Christ-centered conversation. Mark, welcome to the Christ and Coffee podcast. I'm so glad you're finally on the program.
Thank you. Hi, great to be here.
Very important question. It's a very profound question, very theologically loaded question. How do you drink your coffee?
Black, of course.
That's the only correct answer, even though I don't tell my other guests that, but the listeners at this point will know that I also drink my coffee black. And if you love the taste of the coffee, there's the only way to drink it.
And I do.
And when did you start drinking coffee?
I started in high school. We used to go out to this restaurant called Perkins.
Where was this?
In suburban Minneapolis.
Okay.
Remember there was a Perkins restaurant in Hopkins, Minnesota we used to go to. I remember we saw Billy Jack one night, which got us all worked up as high school kids. And I remember us sitting at the restaurant talking about Billy Jack. And then college continued to, go out late at night and have coffee. And I was a smoker, and coffee and cigarettes went good together. Of course, cigarettes went with everything when you smoke. But yeah, I've always liked coffee. And then I worked in TV news for a long time, and a lot of late nights in TV news. So you're always drinking coffee up until midnight. And then I kind of got immune to it. So you work till midnight, go home and go to sleep. So
yeah, well, amazing. What is there like a Wild West coffee culture? Is there like an American coffee culture that's before kind of this like hipster coffee scene?
Yes, coffee was always a big part of the cowboy scene, even back in the day, back in the 1800s. Chuck Wagon always would have coffee, and they had a different way of making it, because there are still people that do Chuck Wagon.
What's Chuck Wagon?
Chuck Wagon was on the cattle drives. Okay, they drive the cattle from like Texas up to Dodge City, Kansas, and put them on a train, ship them to the Chicago stockyards. And so they'd have sometimes like a couple thousand cattle, because after the Civil War, there were all these wild cattle in Texas, and the South was impoverished from the war. And somebody got the idea to gather up these wild cattle that became wild while the men were away fighting the Civil War, gather up these wild cows and drive them up north because the East needed beef. And that's how the cattle drives got started. So the chuck wagon, so you'd have, on the cattle drive, you'd have maybe 15 guys total driving a couple thousand cattle, and there'd be the cook driving a wagon, what they called the chuck wagon, which was like a covered wagon converted into a kitchen. And so he'd be in charge of making the food and making the coffee. And so coffee was always a big deal with the cowboys on the cattle drive. And today there are chuck wagon cook-offs, guys that'll have their own chuck wagon. And when you go to cowboy festivals, like they're having one this weekend in Santa Clarita, California, the Santa Clarita Cowboy Festival. If you go out there in years past, there's been a chuck wagon where they cook food over the fire, and cowboy coffee is a big part of that.
What makes cowboy coffee special or unique? What?
Well, they say a good cup of cowboy coffee is where you can put the spoon in the middle of the cup and it stands up straight. So
whatever gets out
melts.
Or melts. That's amazing. What got you involved with this culture? What was there something that you just always wanted to do, or was it what got you into the cowboy culture?
When I was a kid growing up, there were a lot of Westerns on television. Bonanza Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, and I grew up watching those things, and I wanted to be a cowboy. One of the movies, of course, there were always lots of Westerns back in the day. There's still some, but back in the day, there used to be a lot of Westerns. And when I was in third grade in 1963, there was this great movie called How the West Was Won that came out. That's really a great movie if you've never seen it. Everybody who was anybody at the time in Hollywood was in that movie. John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, Henry Fonda, Debbie Reynolds, and more. And it's this great film. I've seen it so many times I can about memorize it. But I can remember there's a scene where in South Dakota, there's a buffalo stampede. The Indians stampede the buffalo through the railroad construction crew. And they shot that in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And I knew kids that had been out on summer vacation in the Black Hills and had seen those buffalo. And I was so jealous that they got to see the buffalo because my family went back east to Baltimore to visit my grandmother, which was fine. But it was much cooler to see the buffalo. And as a matter of fact, I was in South Dakota this past September shooting a show on the South Dakota Buffalo Roundup. So I've seen those buffalo. I've made up for lost time.
That's amazing. How would you characterize the Wild West? Like, what time period we're talking about? What makes the Wild West the Wild West?
Well, I think the peak of the Wild West is probably from the end of the Civil War until like 1890. But Western history really goes back. I think it really begins maybe with Lewis and Clark, like around Lewis and Clark, two explorers commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson. There was the Louisiana Purchase where we bought this huge chunk of the West from the French. Of course, nobody asked the Indians about that, but the French claimed all this huge, it's kind of like the middle section of the country now. And so Thomas Jefferson commissioned these two guys, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, which came to be known as the Lewis and Clark Expedition. So they took a bunch of guys, they recruited a bunch of young men, and I guess there was fierce competition to be part of that gig. And they left St. Louis, I think in 1804. My dates may not be exactly correct, but they were gone like 2.5 years. They went up the Missouri River, all the way to the end in Montana, and then they traded for horses for the Indians and went to the West Coast, spent the winter in what is now Oregon, I believe, and then came back. And it took them so long, everybody thought they were dead. But that whole part of the West, that's all part of West, the Wild West too, I guess you could. So really, I think if you want to stretch it out, you could say it's from Lewis and Clark to 1890. Really, a very short period of time in which the American West went from this totally wild, unsettled, pristine wilderness ruled by lots of different Indian tribes who were often at war with each other. And then by 1890, that whole way of life was completely gone, and the buffalo that they lived on were gone. And so it was really a short time frame.
Wow. Because I mean, I'm from pop culture. I think my favorite movie about the Wild West is The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. Kind of like when I'm thinking this world, I'm thinking the cowboy movie scene. How is that done a disservice to this world? Does it capture it well, or is it kind of too Hollywood? What are your thoughts on the cowboy movie culture and the actual history?
Well, I think Good, Bad, and the Ugly, by the way, is rated by a lot of people as the very best Western ever made. I think that the reality of the Old West certainly was violent. I mean, you read about there's a guy named Clay Allison. I can't remember what town he was in. It might have been Dodge City or Hays, Kansas, during the 1870s. Somebody was snoring in the next room, so he took out his gun and fired into the room until he killed the guy. And I think nothing of no consequence. So it was violent. It was there was no law, but I don't think it was near as violent as Hollywood makes it out to be. I've read that, like, your typical cowboy on a cattle drive or a typical cowboy working, they often carried guns. They often didn't, because guns are heavy and they kind of get in the way when you're roping cattle or whatever. But I've heard that the typical cowboy back in the day had a pistol and a box of shells and hardly ever used it. Maybe to shoot coyotes or something like that. But so I think the movies are great in that they get people interested in that. When, like, Billy Crystal, City Slickers, movies like that inspire people to want to get out on a horse and do a cattle drive and experience that whole way of life, which to me is great. And I think I know that that's what my television show does too, because I've met people who have seen my show and have gone to a dude ranch or gone on a cattle drive or gone to U.S. Cavalry School. So I think one of the things about the movies that are being made today is I think that they portray the West and our Western history like a lot of media does, in the most they paint Americans that lived in the 1800s as the most despicable, bloodthirsty, Nazi type. They often paint our history in the worst possible light. So I think there's a balance there between glorifying it, American history, and making us look like just the worst people that ever walked the earth. So, because there's a new program, I was just watching the trailer, and it's just an incredibly violent, awful, horrible movie. I mean, I saw the trailer. I don't want to see the show.
Yeah.
And so,
so there's like this aspect of like these superheroes, and then also like these really awful villains who are just like breaking every law. Right. And it's probably not that dramatic.
Right. It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, like How the West Was Won is criticized because there's a scene where the wagon train's been on the road all day and everybody's worn out, and then Debbie Reynolds jumps up and they do a musical number around the campfire, and everybody comes to life and they're dancing around.
Yeah.
Probably didn't happen either.
It probably did not happen.
So there's a middle ground there. But I think what Western movies can do is inspire people to want to go learn how to ride a horse, and inspire people to learn more about the real Western history.
Yeah, and then just to be appreciative of the land and just being kind of outdoors, kind of the exploration, the adventure, and the kind of these characteristics are very American.
Yes, and horseback riding is an adventure. There's a dude ranch I've been to a number of times called the White Stallion Ranch in Tucson, Arizona, and at the horse stable, when you're going to get on the horse, there's this big sign there that says, "Chess is a game, tennis is a sport, but horseback riding is an adventure." And then they have the definition of adventure on the sign. It says, "An activity with an uncertain outcome." So anytime you get on a horse, it could be an uncertain outcome. Now, ideally, you're riding a well-trained horse, right, which is they have at the White Stallion Ranch. That's the great thing about dude ranches, is they have safe horses for people. But anytime you swing a leg over on a horse, you're You never know. There's no guarantee.
Yeah. What are some amazing stories or testimonies out of this period that you could think of? I mean, this whole part, there weren't churches. There was this, like, what was the Christian scene of the Wild West?
There was a pastor friend of mine named Scott Irwin at Hollywood Press, the guy that married my wife and I. He gave me a book one time about a missionary to the Northwest Indians, and it's been quite a number of years. But what I remember about is I don't want your listeners to take me the wrong way. It's not a knock on anybody, because certainly the English back in the day were killing the French, and Irish were killing the English, and the Germans were killing the Russians. I mean, when you have two people groups next to each other, they tend to not get along.
That's history in a nutshell. Like, not just this American history, but
it's humanity. Right? I mean, the Israelites and the
Philistines, and the current wars right now. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always, so, I mean, Dances with Wolves is a great entertaining movie, but it's a fairy tale. You know, I mean, Kevin Costner would have lasted about 3 minutes with those Indians when he rode out to a Sioux Indian village in a cavalry uniform. They would have made quick work of him. This book I'm talking about, this missionary that Scott Irwin gave me, is a book about the Native American life. With this particular group that's portrayed in this book was a very brutal, violent life. And if you read about Plains Indian life, even when white people are not around, if you're a Lakota, also known as Sioux Indian, and you're a Crow Indian, who are their traditional mortal enemies, if I see you and you see me, one of us is going to die. I mean, it's kind of like gang warfare on horseback, and it made about that much sense to me reading it. It's just, there was an awful lot of killing between the tribes, and that's how young men earned honors and became chiefs, and deeds in battle. So this book was about how this missionary was witnessing this violent lifestyle that these native people were living, and brought them to Christianity. And when they were converted, they put an end to this
cycle of violence.
Yeah, cycle of violence. Good way to put it.
Was he able to convert both sides, or how do you remember the details? Or
I don't remember all the details, but I do know that that to this day that there are Christian Catholic schools, free Catholic schools. There's one in Montana called St. Labray, and there's no one would deny that Indian reservations are very troubled places. We took away their way of life, forced them onto the reservation, and they've been there ever since. And they're in areas that are often beautiful, but there's no work, there's no industry. That's why they're beautiful. And so there are missionaries to this day that work with Indian people, and the Christian faith is like to people all over the world, no matter what color your skin is a beacon of hope to people who don't have any. And I think the kind of the message of this book from back in the day was that, God has a better way. You don't have to live this violent, short life of killing each other.
Yeah. I mean, you've been to Indian reservations, part of your programming.
I have.
And what is that kind of? It's like a whole other world within our world, right? Like, I think a lot of Americans are unaware of, like you said, the poverty, the kind of what we've done to them. But each tribe is different, correct? Or each reservation is different, or it's kind of a similar thing you've noticed?
Well, I think they have a lot of things in common. Now, some are better than others. I have not been to all of them, but I've spent a significant amount of time on Indian reservations, and it's hard to generalize, because about Indians are
Native Americans,
or Native Americans are individual human beings, of course,
right?
And some are successful and motivated and are having great lives, and others are not. I think it's clear to everybody that things like, Native Americans, Indians, who actually, when you go on the reservations in Montana, they call themselves Indians. They say it's the White liberals would call them Native Americans. But so to use their term, Indian people on the reservation, they had no exposure before the coming of the white man to alcohol, smallpox, a bunch of other diseases. So they had no tolerance, generally speaking.
Yeah.
You can't obviously generalize to all people about a certain thing, but alcoholism and drug addiction and is a huge problem there, and poverty, and so, and I think that the government has not done much to make it better, because the solution is changing lives one life at a time. And I was going to mention this school in Montana, right outside of the Cheyenne Reservation, which is right next to the Crow Reservation in southeast Montana, big chunk of ground. There's a beautiful Catholic school, K through 12, called St. Lebray. It's been there since 1881, and the superintendent is a Crow Indian, and there are a lot of kids. I've been told over the years, their parents may be such alcoholics that they don't even get their kids off to school, but the kids get themselves off to school and somehow get on the bus to St. Lebray. And St. Lebray has a great track record of being a beacon of hope to people that don't have much, and showing Native American kids what's possible, because a lot of those kids don't even know what's possible.
Yeah,
when you're growing up in poverty out in the middle of nowhere. So, and so I send them, $20 when I can. And, and that's how they live. Those schools are totally free, and that's how those schools are operated on, is all by donations. So the church is helping these kids. Now, there are critics of St. Lebray, because they say they're I don't know why there's critics of St. Lebray. It's a beautiful campus. I think they're doing great work.
Yeah. So it seems like there's just the history of missionaries and expansionism. There always seems to be the promotion of Christianity, which is an ultimate good, and where we believe we could get in trouble for probably saying that. But the ultimate good of spreading the love of Christ, knowing that there's grace and forgiveness there, putting ends to cycles of violence, putting others above your own needs, and then on the negative side is you're also importing diseases, addictions, and creating systems of oppression and losing hope for people. So it's this double end thing. That's just a story of history.
Right, and there's critics of the missionaries. I mean, the stereotypical one is the missionaries went out to pacify the Indians, so the army would have an easier time killing them. And there was an exhibit at the Autry recently about the California missions, and apparently painting them in a very, very negative light. And I talked to a Catholic priest who, I think I'm blanking on the guy's name, but he was an educator, expert on the missions. He went down and at my he had no idea this exhibit was even on. He went down there and thought it was totally, and he wasn't angry or upset. He just thought that's just a totally one-sided distortion of what the California missions were, and that's the American left. And the American left is alive and well in museums, and I think they run a lot of museums. I don't know exactly who runs the Autry, but anyway,
so
the history can get really distorted.
I mean, that history is always up for interpretation, right? And that's the beautiful thing about it, and the negatives and positives. And I think it's important with so many regions that we're covering, so many mini cultures that we're describing, that it's bad to generalize.
It is,
and to kind of see each situation as this unique situation. And you've got to explore a lot of today's Wild West. But before we jump into kind of some of your favorite segments and whatnot, what made you decide to do this in the first place?
Well, I'll answer that in 1 second. I just want to add that I I think a Native American Indian culture is really cool and beautiful and fascinating, and
you're preserving that culture by that, like you're what your program does is it promotes these cultures.
yes, our show is about all things Western. So I've had the great privilege of interviewing a number of American Indian, Native American artists, bead artists, expert bead artists. I've also done print stories on them, and there are great painters and bead artists. And there's a guy in South Dakota that makes amazing art out of buffalo horns, and just the whole culture. I always think it'd just be amazing to what I would love to do if I could go back in a time machine is just to experience life as a Native American back in the day, with when the country was pristine. And there's actually a really fascinating series of books by a guy named James Willard Schultz, who lived with the Blackfeet Indians in Montana in the last couple of years of the free Indian days, and went on buffalo hunts and did all this amazing stuff. And his books are a window into this world that no longer exists. That world is as far away as Mars is today, but I just think it'd be fascinating to experience that culture firsthand. So I'm very sympathetic to the plight of the American Indian, and I want to do whatever I can to help today's generation. But to answer your question, what got me interested in this, I think I mentioned, I grew up watching Westerns, grew up watching movies, worked on a cattle ranch in Montana. Clear to me that you didn't make any money, even if you own the ranch, so I was told. I became a TV news guy. I always was interested in riding horses as long as I can remember. There's a picture of me, I think, when I was in second grade on a horse with this grin that could have swallowed a banana. But I was in Los Angeles. So I went and had a career in television news, starting in Mason City, Iowa, where I was the reporter, the anchor, the writer, the producer, the photographer, the videotape editor. I started there. I ended up in Los Angeles working as a news writer for first KNBC and then KCAL. And in 1999, I saw a blurb in the LA Daily News about the Pierce College Rodeo. Went out to that and discovered they had this horseback riding program at Pierce College where they taught you how to saddle, bridle, pick up the feet, clean out the hooves, and taught you how to ride a horse, which I thought I knew a little bit how to do. I discovered at that school I knew nothing about riding horses. And that started me on this journey, opened my eyes to this whole world that, despite my interest in TV Westerns, I had no idea even existed. Even though I was working in TV news where I thought I was an informed person, right?
Yeah.
Working in journalism, I'd never heard about all this stuff that was going on about dude ranches and pack trips up the mountains with a string of mules, where you go up for a week up into the mountains with horses and camp out, and native culture going on today, and all these historic sites and all this amazing stuff. So I got the idea to combine my experience as a TV news guy with my passion for the American West. And long story short, I created this show called Today's Wild West, a half-hour documentary-style TV series on all things Western.
And you did this like later in your career. Any advice for people who think that they might have like missed out on their passion or their a second career kind of thing? Like, what made you take that leap? Because most people, I think, wouldn't be like, all right, I'm going to now pivot my career and do this program on my passion. You have any advice for people who maybe, like never having the desire to take that leap of faith and just try to do something that they always wanted to do?
Well, I think one of the reasons I did it, I'd love to have kids. I don't have kids. So I wasn't saving for college. I wasn't supporting anybody. I was married to my wife, Marilyn, but we don't have children. So if you're raising kids, saving for college, it's a little tough to like run off to Hollywood or whatever.
Yeah.
I think, though, that said, that it's, I'm sure everybody's heard it. You should do what you love. You should follow your dream. It's best to do that in a practical way if you can. And I think that if I had looked at this as a I think one thing about the cowboy world is people do it because they love it. I don't think there's hardly anybody in it who's doing it because they want to get rich, unless you're Kevin Costner making movies about it. I think people do it. I do it because I love doing it. I mean, I'm paying the rent every month and all that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
But I think I made a lot more money working for Channel 2
Yeah.
in Los Angeles than I have doing this television show. But I've had a lot more fun doing this television show, and I've met all these amazing people and had all these amazing experiences. So would I trade the last 10 years doing this show to be back in the news business where maybe my bank account would be bigger? I'd have to say definitely not. But I was in a position to be able to do it too. Like I say, I wasn't supporting kids or whatever. So it's tough if depends on what your circumstances are.
Right.
I think I would encourage people to do what you love to do, because if you love doing it, then you'll be inclined to be better at it. Now, obviously that's within reason. I mean, like if you love playing basketball and you want to be on the Lakers, that might be a little challenging, but within reason, obviously.
Within reason, of course. Yeah.
And if you know what your goals and talents and abilities are.
And you happen to have a unique skill set of growing up having this love for horses and this culture, and then also having the practical skill sets to pull off a TV show. And you do everything, right? You pretty much are the writer, the editor, the videographer, almost. Yeah, everything.
I do everything. I shoot, write, edit, host, promote, fundraise, look for sponsors. Yeah, I do everything, and that's okay because it's very time consuming, but there's nobody telling me what my content ought to be or saying you can't put that in your show. Chris, my show is not controversial. We don't get into heavy issues like what we were just talking about with.
Yeah.
My show, the motto of my show is the Wild West is still out there, and we'll show you how to find it. You know what I want to do. I want to have a program that's kind of like what happened with Billy Crystal's movie City Slickers, which came out in the early '90s. Everybody watched City Slickers and said, "Man, I want to be a cowboy and go on a cattle drive." I want people to watch my show and be inspired to go experience the West or learn how to ride. And I know from some anecdotal stories over the years that is what's happening.
That's amazing. What are some of your favorite segments you've made?
Well, before I answer that, there's something that popped in my head about how this all came to be. So I was working in TV news, and I had become a Christian when I was 15, and then I only lasted about a year. I was like the seed on the path. And then 20 years later, I won't spare you the details, but my life is a wreck, and I'm recommitting my life to the Lord. I'm like in my 30s, and I'm talking to this pastor up in Sacramento, and I thought my life was over. It's just my life is ruined. I've ruined my life. And he said, God can take a thread here and a thread here and weave together a whole new life. And I was out of the TV news business at the time. And that's what God did with me, is took this passion I have for the West and this skill set I developed working in television news and
Brought it together.
Brought it together. And then when I went out to Pierce College and signed up for that horse program, then I learned how to ride. So I've have this unique skill set of knowing how to put TV news stories together. I have this passion for the West, and I have the writing ability now where I shoot a lot of stuff.
So you definitely see this show as a calling that you have to do, because it's connected to your spiritual reconversion, and also that. Do you feel like this is a calling?
I do feel like it's a calling. I feel like this is. I don't feel like I know this is God's show, and that I've been given to do. I really believe that. And I always say it's got to be God's show. It wasn't even my idea.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do feel it's a calling. I do feel like it's holding up, to paraphrase Paul, the good, the clean, the pure, the powerful, right? That's the line Zig Ziglar, the motivational speaker, used to use all the time. I think Paul uses different words, but I think it gives people a chance to see a world that there aren't any westerns on television hardly today, at least, and a lot of them that are you wouldn't want your kids to watch. So my show holds up this amazing part of America that a lot of people don't even know exists.
Yeah, that's still active. Yeah.
Yeah, and the message I ever you can learn to ride a horse. You can go on a pack trip. You can go to a dude ranch. You can do all this stuff. You can go to the Crow Fair in Montana, which is this huge, amazing powwow celebration of Native American culture in Montana in August every year. And there's all kinds of stuff we do on our show that people can go do too. There's a school in Colorado that'll teach you how to be a bull rider, how to ride bronc horses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's fun. It's really fun. And there's nothing like being on a horse, being in this amazing country, and even here in Los Angeles, we have a park called Griffith Park, 4,500 acres. There's riding stables on the edge of the park where they'll rent you a horse, take you up in the mountains. Right here in Los Angeles, and I'll bet you $1 that the vast majority of people that live in this city have never heard of that.
I just heard about it right now. Okay. Yeah.
But my favorite episodes, boy, that's I'm not a parent, but that'd be like picking out your favorite kid, I guess, because they're all memorable. I mean, I always think of U.S. Cavalry School in Montana. U.S. Cavalry School is a week-long immersion into the life of an 1870s cavalry soldier, and it takes place on the same ground where Custer's last stand was, also known as the Battle of the Little Bighorn.
What was that battle about?
Custer's last stand was this is 1876. The Lakota Indian tribe, also known as the Sioux, and their allies, the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, were like the last holdouts. This was taking place in kind of southeast Montana, northeast Wyoming. That was kind of the last area where kind of the last stand of the free Indian life, and where there was still buffalo and they were still living the old way. And long story short, there was this huge tide of humanity from Europe coming to the United States, moving out west. I mean, the Indians were fighting a losing cause. One of the ways they used to take the fight out of the Indian chiefs was to put them on a train, send them back to D.C., and they had no conception that there were that many people on the planet, and once they would do that, they did that to Red Cloud, who was a famous Lakota war chief, and once he went back to D.C. and saw what he was up against, he said, we have no chance. We need to come to some accommodation with these people. So, 1876, some famous chiefs, Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, are leading this the remnant of Sioux Cheyenne Indians living the old way, and the government, Ulysses S. Grant, put out this order. You guys need to give this up and move to the reservation. They said, make us. So they sent this huge U.S. Army group, a bunch of soldiers from the west, Bozeman, Montana, a bunch from North Dakota, where Custer was coming from, Fort Lincoln, and another group from the south to attack these Indians, conquer them, and force them onto the reservation. And Custer got out ahead of the rest. Custer was coming down from North Dakota anyway. He got out ahead of the other two groups, and he attacked, and kind of like the Germans at Stalingrad, the attacker became the victim. So Custer got cut off and surrounded, and all of his everybody with Custer was killed. So, and there's this great mystery about this great enduring mystery, because Custer has split his command into three groups. And so the group that he commanded was about 230 men, I believe. They all got surrounded and cut off. In the meantime, there was another group like 5 miles away that was also they didn't get wiped out, but they lost a lot of people. And so there's always been this mystery that Custer's last stand is there's been a bazillion books written about it because there's this element of mystery because
What really happened?
there
Yeah.
were no white survivors, and the Indians were afraid to talk about it for fear of retribution.
Yeah.
So that's what Custer's Last Stand is. So U.S. Cavalry School.
So you're in this historic battleground.
Yes.
Learning how to be cavalryman.
Yes, and it takes place right on the banks of the Little Bighorn River where the Indian village was that day, land that today is owned by a Crow Indian family by the name of the Real Birds. And the Real Birds put on a reenactment of the Custer Battle, which is like, the Custer Battle is a part of their reenactment. It's more like an outdoor play told from the Indians' point of view about the coming of the white man. So there are actually several battles in this big play that they do, culminating with Custer's Last Stand. And like I say, it's written by the Crow Indian family, the Real Birds. And a lot of tourists that are in the area come to watch this. And it's very enlightening to them. So Cavalry School, it's like 8, 9, 10 days where you live in big wall tents right along the banks of the Little Bighorn River, and you get up in the morning, put a real cavalry uniform on, and got your holster, and you have a real single action unloaded Colt 45 on your hip, which they teach you how to ride the same kind of saddle that the cavalry use, which is called a McClellan saddle, and you ride the battlefield, and you learn what happened where, and you understand that Custer had no idea that there were 10 times as many Indians as he had men on the other side of the hill, because you're riding in these super steep ravines. They're like grassy mountains almost. And it's just an amazing lesson in that segment of American history. You also learn about how the U.S. cavalry evolved, kind of equipment they used, how they used swords, all this stuff.
So that seems like an amazing experience. Like you're reliving the history. You're understanding the little details that gets lost when you just read it in a history book. You're actually have these moments to experience history. And it seems like you're preserving history, capturing history, and encouraging people to not lose sight of this kind of lifestyle of riding and exploring nature, of cattles and rodeos and everything else. So it's quite amazing, and your passion is very apparent, and it's just cool to hear it. And it's also funny too how like when you became like a all-in Christian, the passion got more. And I feel like that tends to happen when people become Christians. They become passionate about these things that God cares about. So it's cool to see that this show is born out of a calling, born out of these dormant passions kind of being reawakened, and like now I want to show people, and there's these things that are still active, and I want to just encourage people just to live it out and learn and enjoy. So it's really amazing stuff. Was there really a segment that you regret, or like was too hard and not worth the effort, or because you've done quite a bit?
I've done 48 half-hour episodes. By the way, I have to just add about the cavalry school thing is that that does not like glorify General Custer as like some hero. It also doesn't paint him as an evil, genocidal Indian killer. I think one of the things you learn about being there is that Custer, like General David Petraeus in Iraq, was carrying out the orders of the president.
Yeah.
He wasn't setting the policy. So it's Custer has been painted in a like some demon or something, but he was a general in the army following his orders. But anyway, I can't say there's ever been an episode that I regretted doing or that was really they're difficult and they're time consuming, and when you're out there, like I don't have a script when I go out there, so it's not like I'm working off of a plan. What I try to do is be a fly on the wall and just capture the experience. So I'm like always shooting and end up with a mountain of tape to go through when I get done. So there's a fair amount of pressure when you're there because you get one chance to capture that one moment.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of showing, not just telling. You're like,
Right.
This is what it looks like. This is the experience. You could do this too. But Yeah, I mean, so you've done 48 episodes, you said, or how many episodes?
I have 45 that are on the air now, and I've finished 3 new ones, and I'm working on another 3 for this year. So
And within each episode, there's about 3 different segments.
right, each show is a half hour long. There some shows like U.S. Cavalry School. I've done a few that are just one topic.
Yeah.
But most shows have like 3 segments, maybe 4, sometimes 5, depending on how long they are. But
So like over 150 experiences of the Wild
yeah.
West, and that's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
And there's so many stories we could unpack, but you captured many of them for the viewers to watch.
And one of the things that you mentioned, this passion I had that was reignited after I got recommitted to the Lord. You know, people have this, I think, have this idea that being a Christian is like, you know, God is this cosmic buzzkill that just wants you to sit in church all the time and lead a boring life. I'm having more fun doing this than I've ever had in my life when I was, you know, smoking 2 packs a day and drinking too much and doing other stupid things. And, and God's plan is God wants you to have a great life. He wants you to be successful. He wants you to have fun. He wants you to be happy. He wants you to be fulfilled. And that doesn't mean you're not going to have some difficult challenges, but he'll be there to help you through. So I just got to tell people, when you're following the Lord, and I'm all work in progress, but it's way better than the alternative because I've done both ways.
Yeah. With that said, one final question, and you might have just answered it, but what is one message you would like to tell to the church in America?
Well, I think it's a message I would tell everybody. You know, I do a television show, so I want you to watch my TV show, but then I want you to go out and live and get outside and see the stars and get on a horse and experience life. I think, you know, it's hard to, like we've talked about, you can't overgeneralize with anybody, whoever it is, the church or whoever. But I think, I think you need to get out and experience and enjoy God's creation, and not sit in front of television and fill your head with stuff that maybe isn't so good to fill it with. You know, even the news. You know, we need to be informed, but you can't sit there and you know, obsess about all the problems in the world. I think you know, God made us to. God gave us dreams and desires. And I read a lot of motivational stuff because I have no boss. Well, my boss actually I do is God. I mean, he inspired this program. He gave me this unique set of talents and all these amazing opportunities to go out and tell these stories. But I would follow your heart, follow your passion, and lean on God. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there. I read a lot of Rick Warren devotionals and Norman Vincent Peale and Charles Stanley, and they all talk about, and I'm sure you do too, about that God wants you to set goals. God wants you to develop your talents, skills, and abilities. God wants you to be out there in the world making a difference. And then when you're out there, you know, there's a church I've been to. I'm sure you've seen churches like this. When you're driving out of the parking lot, there's a sign there that says, "You are now entering the mission field." And I'm a better probably Western evangelist than I am a Christian evangelist, but I would, because I'm just,
It's your culture, yeah.
I'm excited about it, but I'm excited about, you know, sharing the Lord too when I have the opportunity. You know, most of the time when I do that, people get upset or angry or whatever, but I'm not very good at it. But God wants you to have an amazing life, and if you're a believer, if you're not a believer, I see people on the street. I say, God will help you if you ask Him. So ask Him. If you don't feel like you're living the life that God wants you to live, talk to Him. He'll help you. I mean, He's helped me in so many ways. I used to owe $50,000 on my credit cards, and He paid all those off. Every cent. I didn't go bankrupt. I paid them all off. I used to be a hopelessly addicted chain smoker. He broke that habit 30 years ago. I mean, God can do amazing things, and now we're having this amazing life doing this television show, which is difficult at times. I mean, like you think, why am I doing this? Kind of difficult, but it's also very rewarding, and I'm not giving up on it. And we're gonna keep doing it. I was working on it today, and we have a story to tell, and get out there and enjoy your life.
Well said. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the end of this conversation. Stop listening, go out there and enjoy God's creation and enjoy your life. God bless you. See you next week. And remember to stay caffeinated, my friends. God bless you.